Foundation. My name is Kyeen Heng, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president for the Center Sierra Health Foundation and the senior vice president for programs in partnership with the Sierra Health Foundation. We're delighted to have all of you with us today. This is the final installment of the Sierra Health Foundation's speaker series for 2023, and we're just really proud for those of you who've been along with us this year for the speaker series to learn with us. Before I provide a quick introduction to our topic today, there are a few people I'd like to acknowledge. One in particular is Dave Gordon. Dave serves on the board of Sierra Health Foundation, and he is with SCOE, Sacramento County of Education, as the superintendent, so we're thrilled to have Dave here, always supporting the staff and everything we do, so we're delighted. Thank you, Dave, for taking time. We have a phenomenal board who allows us to do incredible work, one of which is a speaker series and allowing all of us to learn together, so thanks. Another colleague I'd like to introduce is Ed Harris. Ed is our new Chief Operating and Finance Officer. Ed just joined us on Monday, so for those of you who are here in person and online, please meet Ed Harris, our new co-founder. So with that, let me just offer some reflection, because 'tis the season, right? Before I turn it over to our amazing colleagues to invite us into a conversation that is so appropriate and so timely, especially during the holidays. You know, this is the season when we think about the year and we reflect about the year. It is for us also here at the Center Sierra Health Foundation, a time for us to think about our portfolio, particularly around our COVID portfolio during the pandemic. What we've learned as we're sunsetting the portfolio is that people who were disproportionately impacted by COVID are, folks who live in completely distressed, impoverished community. And what reminds us is that economic status has been and continues to be a huge determinant of health. Poverty is more than just a lack of income, right, and productive resources to ensure sustainable lives. It affects health by limiting access to proper nutrition and healthy food, shelter, safe neighborhoods, clean air, safe drinking water to drink and bathe, and other elements that define standards of living. As a grant maker, primarily in health, we see the connection between all of this, which is why we're so pleased to invite all of you to learn with us more about basic income and today Guaranteed Income Program. The idea that government should provide minimal levels of income to meet basic needs is gaining momentum across the country and certainly here in California. In recent years, the Sierra Health Foundation and the Center have had the opportunity to support a few pilots right here in our hometown. From contributing to the Guaranteed Income Fund, which is managed by Social Finance, we'll hear more about them today, to supporting Yolo County in the demonstration of what local government can do, right, if they're applying a guaranteed income lens to the families that are served by county. To most recently, our support to our local United Way Capital Region, in helping to support what will be in 2024, 180 families, to be able to bridge the gap between what they're living with in terms of income right now to what it means to be able to have access to income, to be able to live with basic standards of living. And we look to continue to learning from all of these pilot projects. We know that there are many more pilots, and we're looking forward to joining forces. We're happy to do our part, but we also know, right, that there are a lot of questions and perhaps some concerns about Guaranteed Income Program. And that is why we are partnering with Ending Poverty in California, EPIC, which is a nonprofit organization created and led by the former Stockton Mayor, Mayor Tubbs, as an effort to really help us understand what is behind poverty, to be able to unpack the narratives about poverty, one that is based oftentimes on stereotypes, perhaps false stereotypes about why people experience poverty to an authentic narrative based on why poverty persists. One that identifies policy choices as a reason for why so many families are set up to fail. Basic income and guaranteed incomes are relatively new concepts, right? And as we know, people can be skeptical or intimidated by them. We saw this when affordable health care was introduced. But what now has become a widely accepted, right, concept, right? New research about guaranteed income and universal basic income programs have proven that it's a benefit to community health. But Californians do need to learn more about these programs, and we're proud to play our part in learning more about this and being able to amplify the concept. For us, this is a strategy to eradicate poverty as a critical determinant of health. So today, we will get to hear from Social Finance and two of its partners that are connecting families with resources while also combating harmful narratives that entrench poverty. I look forward to learning from Social Finance's Leah Greenberg, Arstia Salisbury from the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, and Angie Sundberg, who is the Director of Social Services at Trinidad Rancheria. And now, Leah, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Kaying, and thank you to the whole team at Sierra Health that has made today's speaker series work out for us to be here today. We're excited to share a bit about the work that we have all collectively been doing related to guaranteed income. I feel like I can hear myself twice, but you guys will get to hear a lot of me then. I was going to try to advance to some slides to provide some context on what's bringing the three of us on stage here together today, but beyond the remarks that Kaying opened with, I know that guaranteed income may be a new concept to some of you, and for others, you may have been learning about this for quite some time now. But just to start us off and kind of level set for the full group, I wanted to provide some context on what guaranteed income is when we're using that phrasing and what some of the benefits are of guaranteed income. So at its core, guaranteed income is the concept that you should be providing unconditional payments on a recurring basis that help to raise the income floor for individuals in need. Those kind of elements of it being fully unconditional, meaning there's no work requirements and no kind of other stipulations associated with getting that payment, is really core to this idea of guaranteed income. As you can see, it's available to everyone, that there aren't other kind of elements that might exclude you from participation. And also key to the concept of guaranteed income is that this isn't replacing other social safety net programs, it's supplementing that. The benefits of a guaranteed income, we'll talk a little bit more as we get into some examples from the program that Aristea is running in McKinleyville, but the core idea here is that people know best what they need and should be trusted to use those funds how they see fit. And so in providing a guaranteed income, you really are allowing folks to preserve dignity, that kind of core idea around self-determination, and of course, resilience. And we'll hear a little bit more about where we see some of the benefits of guaranteed income in the populations we're serving. The last thing I wanted to mention is, there's a lot of other kind of terminology related to unconditional cash transfers. Oftentimes you'll hear about a universal basic income versus guaranteed income. The core difference here being that a guaranteed income is a targeted program. So looking to serve a set of individuals in need rather than a blanket policy. I think there's pros and cons to thinking about these different approaches, but that's kind of the core differentiator that we'll be talking about here today. So as Kang mentioned, Sierra Health has been a really wonderful partner with social finance in the state of California's Guaranteed Income Pilot Program. There are hundreds now of pilots domestically that have launched to advance guaranteed income and test out this approach with different populations throughout the country. What's really exciting about the work that's happening here in California is this is a first of its kind state-led investment on the scale of $35 million appropriated by the state legislature to advance pilots throughout the state in a coordinated way. So the state will be able to fund what is in total 7 different pilots throughout the state and conduct a statewide evaluation across all of those pilots to learn individually from the experiences of each program, but also holistically across the state. So when this program was announced, the state funding, as with most state funding, comes with a match requirement. And our partners at the California Department of Social Services were really cognizant about wanting to ensure that this exciting program would be equitably offered throughout the state rather than concentrating funding in some of the urban areas that we know so often are able to access things like philanthropic dollars to complete a match requirement. And so that's really where the idea of this guaranteed income pooled fund came from. And so the Guaranteed Income Pooled Fund is essentially a public-private partnership between the state of California and a set of funders who are interested in ensuring equitable access for different communities throughout the state in being able to launch a guaranteed income pilot program. You can see here, along with social finance, we worked with a couple other key players in this space, so Asset Funders Network, the Economic Security Project, and Mayors for a Guaranteed Income to help design this pooled fund and think about how to best ensure that folks who are receiving grants from the state would be able to meet those match requirements and be able to actually successfully launch a program. The core purpose of the fund, in addition to providing this match funding, was also to introduce private dollars into the pilot programs. The reason this is critical is these programs are able to then access things like waivers for CalFresh and other benefits to ensure that payments coming to individuals through guaranteed income programs aren't counted as income. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different things to navigate within a guaranteed income program when it comes to the interactions with other existing benefits. And so in cases where this introduction of new income would make someone ineligible for their existing benefits, you're not going to see the impact and really the purpose of the program. So the presence of these philanthropic dollars played a really core role in allowing these programs to access waivers and ensure continuity of these benefits. And then lastly, we'd just say there's a real focus within the pooled fund in ensuring that these grant dollars went to rural and programs serving tribal nations as well, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So along with Sierra Health, we had 5 other funders from the state of California that came together and provided grant funding to enable this program. And the pooled fund resulted in grants to 3 different grantees, 3 of the 7 programs selected by the California Department of Social Services to launch pilots throughout the state. So you see those 3 here today. So this program is funding the work by Inland Southern California United Way, which is serving pregnant individuals as well as former foster youth. A program called iFoster, which, as you may imagine, is serving former foster youth throughout the state of California. And then the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, which I'm going to allow Aristea to speak to the good work that that program is doing. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Aristea to provide a bit of an overview about the work that her pilot program is doing and to speak a little bit more about how that program and the others funded by the pooled fund and the state are really focusing on embedding narrative change into the work that we're doing, which is so core to the impact of these programs.
Great. Thank you so much. Before I go any further, I want to make sure that I credit the person who is leading all of this work from the McKinleyville Family Resource Center. My colleague and fellow co-executive director, Robin Baker, has really been the person who envisioned this program, has made sure that it has come to fruition. I have been able to be a cheerleader, and the only reason she isn't here with us today is that they officially launched on Monday, so they've been a little bit busy, but it's very exciting for us to get to do this project. Some of the overview of what we are calling the Humboldt Income Program, or HIP, is that we are going to be providing $920 a month, either via check or a preloaded debit card to families or to individuals. We're looking for 150 people who are currently in their first or second trimester of pregnancy. And we are working with a large group of trusted partners and providers to provide referrals to us so that we do not need to verify that someone is pregnant in order for them to enter the program. And that work with our partners has been especially important as we're trying to figure out how do we make this project equitable? How are we accounting for the fact that there are systemic barriers that impact parts of our population? Let's see. The other requirement we had was initially we were looking at 150% of the federal poverty level as one of our requirements. However, as you all know, things are getting even more expensive for families, and so we have upped that to be able to include more people in the pilot. And then I think it's also important to share with you the demographics. So we're from McKinleyville, California, which is very far north. When people say that San Francisco is Northern California, we all go, no, it's not. Yeah. So yeah, it's about 5.5 hours to drive there, and you can pick your route. But Humboldt County has kind of a very unique set of demographics. And we have really wanted to share with people what those demographics look like as we're talking about what justice looks like in our community. So you'll see on the slide here, Humboldt County is 72% non-Hispanic white, but birth demographics show that roughly 60% of children that are being born right now are non-Hispanic white, which tells us that there is some demographic change happening in our community that we're getting ready for in a variety of ways. And as we're doing that, there are stereotypes about Humboldt County. It is very common to hear Humboldt County is so white. And for me, while that is true, if you're letting people know when they're coming to visit what to expect when they get there, sometimes we have college students come up from LA and they go, oh my God, and they're not prepared. We also really have some very strong communities. For example, the first white residents arrived in Humboldt County about 1850. We also have documented in our 1860 census our first Mexican residents and our first Black residents. So there is diversity within our community. And we also can't ignore the fact that we have a large indigenous population. So in our community, we are focusing really intensely on our relationships with tribal communities and tribal individuals. 6.2% of our population identifies as Native. We also have a relatively high number of folks who identify as 2 or more races. Oftentimes that includes people who are Native. And then, Angie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything kind of about the history of our area.
Sure. Can you hear me? Is my mic on? So Humboldt County is very unique. It's very rural, but it also includes 8 federally recognized tribes, which is it's a high population of federally recognized tribes for the state of California. I think the only other county that has more federally recognized tribes is Riverside County. So through Humboldt County, there has been a lot of genocide that happened, and you know, historically, there's been just a lot of historical trauma that's happened to Native people, and because of that, we were put on reservations, and the poverty level, the social injustices that happen affect all of our people. So there's a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of you know, victim blaming almost also that comes with being Native in Humboldt County. There are still buildings today that were used to sell scalps in Humboldt County. People were paid to kill Native people and bring their scalps in. So those buildings are still there in Humboldt County and next to our college there that a lot of people don't know about. But that's kind of our history in Humboldt County, and you can go back and read it in the newspapers and all the things. And so we have been combating all of these stereotypes for generations. So, but in Humboldt County, it is, you know, we have thriving Native communities that are revitalizing our culture. We're bringing back ceremony, we're bringing back our language, and so all of these things also help combat the stereotypes that happen on a daily basis in Humboldt County. So,
Great, thank you. So what are some of these stereotypes? Thank you for that great transition. So we are familiar with some myths about Native folks, and that's really informed our preparation for being prepared for myths about guaranteed income. So one of those myths that we hear a lot is if you have something like guaranteed income, people won't want to work. People will be lazy. However, we have very present in our recent history this idea that Native folks are lazy. There's a lot of interesting research, including as recently as, you know, the first half of the last century, where there are anthropologists going to study Native people who note that we were not doing much. We were just sitting around a lot of the time. When in fact, we know that there was, you know, A, an efficiency in work, and B, work was also spread out in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit more about the ways that Native people are often holding a lot more than non-Native folks as they're trying to be productive within general American society. Another myth that we know is the most common question you hear from folks that are skeptical about guaranteed income is, but what will they use the money for? And the implication there is people will use the money for things that are frivolous or things that are illegal or things that are judged as not ways that you should spend your money. We also know that for Native people, there are all of these stereotypes about Native folks as being alcoholics, being addicts, being gamblers. And so that's another narrative that we were prepared to be able to deal with. We very much believe in people, as Leah was saying, we very much believe in people to be able to define themselves, and we also know that the research shows that those myths are very much that. They are myths. And then the third myth that we have encountered more recently that we wanted to make sure to talk about was the fact that our pilot is specifically focusing on tribal populations because we want to add that to the tapestry of work that's coming from all of these different pilots that we have. And I think sometimes people are the assumption that by focusing on Native populations, we are therefore leaving out other populations. And so there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I note. One is that we have a lot of people in our communities who are Native and, you can be Native and white, you can be Native and Black. Our communities are extremely diverse, and it's through some of the demographic tracking tools that gets lost in that 2 or more races. So just to note that we are aware of that. And then we also don't view justice as a zero-sum game. Justice is not a pie. It's not, we only have this many slices for you all. It is a matter of if we can figure out how to navigate benefits waivers with federally recognized tribes in our region, how can that enhance our partners who are doing work with Black mothers in an urban area? And how do we trade the things that we're learning as we go? So those are some of the myths that we are facing. And we just wanted to ask you all to take a moment to consider, who does it benefit to perpetuate these myths? Normally, I'm a facilitator who would then make you all talk, but I won't do that today. But I do really encourage you to take this question with you, because I think there are a lot of folks that do benefit and institutions that do benefit from these myths that may or may not be interested in the same kind of justice that I imagine would bring you to a space like this today. Now, as we transition into the next part of this conversation, I really want to share with you all what we have found in our community in terms of countering myths. We could, if we go back to this slide, we could spend a lot of time building a campaign that says people are not lazy. We could spend a lot of time building a campaign saying, look at all of this research that says people are actually buying household goods. They're actually doing fun activities with their families and building social determinants of health. However, by watching the tribes in our region, we have found that narrative change actually looks a little bit different. I'll give the example of the Wiyot tribe. So the Wiyot tribe has a part of its history that is very dark. There was a genocide that occurred just off the coast of Eureka, California. It was particularly focused on women, children, and elders. And it was a very graphic part of the history, and it was very important for the Wiyot tribe to make people aware of this history. And at a certain point, we had built enough knowledge. I say we, I'm Yurok, not claiming Wiyot. At a certain point, the story needed to go further than that. People are more than their tragedies. People are more than the barriers that they're dealing with. And so the Wiyot tribe started to talk about the future. And what that resulted in was one of the examples we have here, which is the return of Tuluwat, which is the island where this massacre occurred. And it is the first example of a municipality returning land to a tribe voluntarily. It is the result of decades and decades of work to change the narrative. And I think that it's also a great example of how we have context without that context driving the story. I've got on a soapbox. What would you like to add, Angie?
I just wanted to add that the Tuluwat Island was a place where they did hold ceremony. It's why the women and children and the elders were there doing ceremony. So this was an island that is now returned to the tribe, and they are it was toxic when they got it back, and so they have done all of the revitalization work to clean it up and restore it so all the toxic stuff is gone, and they are able to hold their ceremony there again, which is incredible. And so my daughter is actually a WIAT and was able to participate for the first time in that ceremony when they first brought it back. So it's been very special and meaningful to all the WIAT people and all the all the tribes in Humboldt County to be able to participate and support the ceremonies and the return of the island.
Now, you might be wondering, that's really cool, but what is the connection to guaranteed income? And I think a lot of times in our systems and structures, we look for this very linear connection between things and this very clear way, input A, output B, ta-da, it works or it doesn't. But in fact, I think that there is a lot more complexity that we have to pull into these conversations. When I think about the return of Tuluwat, when I think about people who are engaging in land back work, people who are engaging in environmental cleanup work, I think about people who also have full-time jobs, who are also likely not getting paid very much for those jobs. Those people often have families and are helping take care of extended family members. And these are often folks who are fighting against a lot of systemic barriers in the process. And so something like guaranteed income then opens up space for someone to think about what is the impact that they want to have on their community and gives them room to be able to participate in whether it's the ceremony that happened on the island or the environmental cleanup or looking at another tribe's efforts at land return. So there are a lot of doors that open from a project like this, even if it wasn't necessarily the first thing that was thought of. The other example of this that I want to open up is fairly personal for me because I'm just starting the process, planning for a while, just starting the formal part of the process for my daughter's coming of age ceremony, which is called the flower dance. So, actually, do you want to say anything about what the flower dance is before I jump into the connection?
I'm very excited for Aristea because she is planning her daughter's flower dance, and I have already done a flower dance for my child, so I'm very excited for her. But it is a coming of age ceremony for young girls. It's a 10-day ceremony that puts them to the test, and it's something that my daughter can look back on in her hardest times and say, I know that I can get through this because I did my flower dance. So, and she has already done that. She's a freshman in college now and amazing, smart, and doing great. But she does struggle, and she can look back and say, I got this. During this ceremony, you have 7 sisters that are going to be lifelong supports for my daughter and for Aristea's daughter when she has her ceremony. And she can call on them at any time and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Do you have any advice for me? Can you help me get through this? So it's not all on the parent to be that one particular support. We're building community around her. We're building lifelong supports for her to be able to, manage life and stay connected to her culture, her community, her people. So that's kind of, I don't know, a little bit about like the special thing behind this ceremony. So,
Thanks. And so similar to what we were talking about before with Tuluwat, there is a lot of time. I did not realize how much time until I did my first planning session with some experienced folks. For example, as Angie mentioned, the 7 sisters. So these are women who are often very busy community leaders. They've often been identified as supports for multiple girls who are growing up. And this means that they end up having this huge need for their time to give to their community, to be connected. And they've got full-time jobs and families and all of these things. So things like guaranteed income then can give folks the potential to be able to work on these cultural connections, these social connections as they work to build them. I know for me, I am someone who wears many hats in the community, and trying to imagine how am I going to carve out the time for this, it's a big burden. And I think our systems very much want people not to be able to focus on their cultures that are outside of the American norm. And so it's important to push through that. But if we can offer people the opportunity to be who they are and who they want to be, then we are potentially contributing to the greatest gift that we can. And what we find through that work is that it builds all of the social determinants of health as we go.
Yeah, I also think too that, with the guaranteed income, it's giving families an opportunity to be able to plan these ceremonies. They're not, they're expensive because you are making regalia. You are going out and gathering materials, and those, whether it be gas money, whether it be the tools that, or the materials that it takes to create these the ceremonial things that they need to be able to do cultural revitalization. This is going to offer an opportunity for people to be able to help pay for this kind of stuff, so they can stay grounded and stay connected and have all those resiliency factors that are going to help families stay away from unhealthy behavior, stay away from things that are going to contribute to the stereotypes that people think of when they think of like free income or so. But just having a broader idea of what people can utilize the funding for, so they can just be grounded and have the resiliency that they need.
Yeah. And I think, taking a step back as we look across the different guaranteed income pilot programs that are launching, I think this element of what does the impact of these programs look like is something that it's been very important to define locally and allow communities to inform what success looks like for them. I think some of the more kind of obvious outcomes that you might look at with programs like this are important and are real in terms of financial stability, the health outcomes, things of that sort. But there's other results from these programs and some of the ripple effects that you're hearing about from Aristea and Angela that may not be top of mind for folks in understanding the impact of a program like this, and may in reality be those protective factors and those strengths that are allowing communities to thrive moving forward. And so as we talk about guaranteed income, really this idea of narrative change is so core to the work. And I will say, the different pilot programs are thinking about it differently. They're serving different populations. They're listening to those that are in their communities and are coming to different answers. So for instance, one kind of common tension within this work is this question around whether these programs should be tracking in a real way how these guaranteed income disbursements are being spent. For some people, that's completely counter to the purpose of this. It's removing that kind of dignity piece, breaking down some of the trust that you should be allowing folks to spend the money however they best see fit, and perhaps, through surveys or other methods, hearing about how they've used that funds. We've heard from other communities, we want this tracked. We want to be able to show exactly how we're using this money. We want to be able to counter this narrative in a really tangible, data-driven way. And so I think that's really important in this case to think about that narrative being built from the ground up by those who are actually participating in the program. And it may not be obvious what the answer might look like, and it may not be obvious what the outcomes may be, but being able to be responsive, I think, allows the program to meet, the goals that it might hope to.
Mm-hmm. And in the process, I think we're helping, all of these pilots are helping each other learn things as we go. For example, there was initially, I believe, a waiver negotiated at the state level with TANF, which is Tribal Assistance for Needy Families. We can get into the naming of programs another day. But they're also, each individual nation engages in their own way in local TANF. So in our case, we have 3 in Humboldt County that we need to be working with, and we needed to negotiate separate waivers with. And so that's stuff that we want to be able to tell our partners. It's important to build long-lasting relationships with tribal nations well before this project, so that you can then carry this work forward within another community that often faces the same disparities as other communities, but in some of your communities, you might look at the data and find that you don't see Native folks on there because oftentimes we're deemed statistically insignificant. One might disagree, but sometimes data and experience don't always match up. But in all of that process, it does take this deep negotiation of who are we, who do we want to be, and how are we working together? And we constantly have to ask these questions, right? When Robin initially envisioned this project, she had an idea of what it would be. And then we have a lot of partners. We have local partners, we have statewide partners. We've got folks who are providing funding, which, just to elevate your point earlier, the ability for us in our community to pull together funds from wealthy folks is very limited. There's only 140,000 of us in Humboldt County in a space the size of Connecticut. So it is very helpful to have those relationships. But as we're building with all of these people, we learn new things, we continue to build, and we carry forward. And it's not as simple as we put in this application, therefore it will look just like that. And I think we need that flexibility from folks in order to build the story together as we go.
And I think, to that point, as we think about the actual implementation of these programs, and I know you all just launched, which is very exciting. We'll have about 4 of the 7 pilots that have now launched, with the others over the next month or 2. And there's a lot more to be learned, I think, as we think about the different spaces that we all work in, the different issue areas. There are many programs that are a lot more complicated on the face than providing money to people. But there's so much more nuance, I think, as these programs have gotten off the ground, to think about how to do this the right way, in the most impactful way, and also to think about how we can learn from these programs to inform other policies or other work that's happening. And so I'll just say very briefly, from the perspective of the state in this case, this is a really incredible opportunity to understand how this kind of unconditional, low barrier access to benefits could really improve the social safety net in California. And I know you were describing some of the eligibility criteria for your program, but the process for folks to enroll and become a part of this program looks pretty different than the process to access more formal state benefits, for instance, getting enrolled in CalFresh or something similar. And so what can be learned from this much lower barrier approach, and what are we seeing in that trade-off? Is there anything that's lost, and trying to find the right balance there? So I think that's a really important piece of this, given that there are now over 100 different pilots throughout the country. The natural question is what comes next, right? So there's a large movement within the guaranteed income space to make that jump from pilot to permanence, or from pilots to policy, and really thinking about what it takes to get there. And I think the core of what we're hearing from our partners is it's the narrative. It is understanding the data and the outcomes and the impact, but it is really that ability to have the storytelling, to understand what is happening with these programs and with this approach, this benefits approach, that is distinct from other types of benefits delivery. And so, as Aristeo was saying, we're very excited in this program that we're also going to be able to hear across all 7 pilots the different approaches and the different experiences, not just by geography, but serving very different populations, and understanding what we can learn across all of those.
I didn't warn you I was going to ask you this, so sorry. But you have a lot of experience in your role, particularly working for the Trinidad Rancheria, with being brought in at different points in a project. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, if it looks or feels different engaging tribes from the beginning in this project.
Sure. Historically, I've been working for tribes my whole career. I'm an enrolled tribal member at Trinidad Rancheria. I came to work for my tribe again about 6 years ago. So I do have a lot of experience over the last 25, 30 years working in social services. And historically, on the county level and the state level, we're an afterthought. Tribes are an afterthought. Oh, we have to, now we have to include tribes. We've just done all this work, and we forgot to include tribes. So what it does is creates an automatic, tension, because folks at the table just created this, say, great MOU or great product that they think. And they say, oh, we forgot to invite you. Come to the table and tell us what you think. Well, if we really tell you what you think, you don't want to hear it, because then, that's a lot of hard work you all just put in, and now you got to change it. Or now you have to hear what you perceive as criticism of, different, because it's a whole different lens. It's a whole different perspective that's going to come to the table. So it creates a lot of tension, and it creates automatic, discord. When you do it at the beginning, the great thing about McKinleyville Family Resource Center and the center is when they developed the center, they included, well, I guess that was an afterthought too. So we had to fight to get a seat at the table when they were creating the center. They did. I've been on the board. We've helped create policies when they all came together. And it was a rough go at first, but we've transitioned, and so, but now everything that they do, we have the relationship with the McKinleyville Family Resource Center and the center. They've learned from their mistakes and have been able to include us from the very beginning. And so it is a breath of fresh air when you don't have to go, what about us? Or, did you think about tribal folks when you were doing this, and how are we going to be able to access, whatever program you're developing? So it has been 100% a different feeling, a different, that relationship is there, and so we're not at odds. We're not, feeling left out. We're not feeling like we're an afterthought, or like, oh, we have to do this because somebody's forcing me to do this now. It feels good. It feels like we're included. It feels like we're part of the community, and it historically has not felt like that. So it has been it's been a great experience so far, and I'm super excited because we just launched, and so we'll probably have more things to learn from, more things that we can talk about in the future after the process gets going. So, but right now it's been leading up to the plate to this point, and planning and doing all the things that it's been how we're supposed to be doing, how we should do it. Mm-hmm. So we can do it together. We can be inclusive and not exclusive.
I know in a couple minutes we want to turn things over and allow some time for Q&A, so I want to say that now just to give folks a second to start percolating on some questions. But maybe before we do that, if you don't mind, Aristea, just sharing a little bit more about, now that this program has launched, kind of what this ongoing partnership looks like, and in particular, how you all are thinking about understanding the experience of participants in the program as you move forward. Within this broader context, we're thinking of the narrative change here and understanding what this guaranteed income will mean for individuals and families.
Yeah. Before I do that, I want to clarify that we have an interagency collaborative that we have named the Center at McKinleyville, which is different than what you might know as the Center. So just so that you all know that. And as in terms of what's next, we have worked really hard with our referral partners, like I mentioned earlier, to make sure that we are reaching populations that tend to be underserved. And Robin was already able to pull some numbers for me. She said that 30% of our initial applications that we've received so far are folks who identify as Native American and American Indian, which is obviously really working to address some of the systemic barriers, because oftentimes where Native folks are overrepresented in the data, they are less positive. So we're very excited to be carrying that forward. And then we're doing a lot of work. So folks have the option, as Leah was talking about earlier, guaranteed income doesn't have expectations of folks. You do not get this money if you attend a job training program, or you get this money if you then complete X hours of community service. It is strings free. However, we are going to be offering programming to folks and ways for folks to engage. There is some survey work that's being done from the state level, but we also want to pull people together. I mean, for me, there's also something that's really exciting about the idea of having up to 150 parenting people being able to come together as their children are in these first few months of life, and building connections and having opportunities to learn things like, I don't know, infant massage or parenting practices, or how do you puree your own baby food. There are a lot of different opportunities for folks to come together. And then as we're doing that, our intention is to capture those stories, because we know that surveys only tell a piece of the picture, but also talking about what are the things people respond, where are they showing up, where are they really choosing to engage, what are the ideas they're putting forward. We often find when you treat people as though they have dignity, then they bring their own ideas to the table, and it's great. So we're going to be pursuing that and documenting, because we don't want this to just be 18 months and over. We want it to be something that we can expand for folks in our community.
Awesome. Thank you. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I would love to create some time for questions from the audience. I know we've got some help with a floating mic if folks want to just raise a hand if there's anything you'd be curious to hear more about.
Thank you so much for all your insights and all the work that you're doing. Oh, does that work? Does that work? Okay. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and prioritizing, guaranteed income for those who are at the margins. Really appreciate that. I was actually just listening last week to an NPR podcast, or it was an NPR story. I think it was last week. I didn't get through all of it, but it was research around some of the guaranteed income programs internationally that are happening, and specifically with communities that were pooling their income that they were given to be able to invest and create that sort of change. And of course, the money that's given, the guaranteed income that's given, is really to make ends meet. Whereas, we know that if you're really trying to get out of poverty, you have to have additional investments, you have to have ways to be able to have sustained income. I think coming from my early days of hearing about guaranteed income and understanding the critiques of it, this is a reality, right? Is that if we really want to get folks out of poverty, we have to be able to invest and allow them to be able to invest. Is there conversation, or are you seeing folks pulling that? I know there's some research and studies. I think some of the programs started 7 years ago, and they're just having research on it. But are you, by any chance, seeing any of the communities you're working with looking to pull that together, or having conversations for, potentially utilizing it for business or other sort of means to be able to really, support their families in the long run?
It's a great question. Not yet. We're 3 days in. And that's the sort of thing that I expect to see developing. For example, when I look at most small businesses and craft businesses, a lot of times those are started by mothers with young children and parents of young children who are just trying to figure out how to have a little extra income. And I'm hoping that by us having these spaces where people can come together, that is a way for us to have conversations about things like, so what do we do with this? Like, is it primarily for groceries, which it might be? Groceries are expensive, $920 a month, depending on how many people you have in the household. That might be where the bulk of it goes. But I think really our job is going to be listening to what participants express interest in learning about, and then being able to respond. So if folks are interested in learning about how do we take this beyond the 18 months, then it's up to our team to come up with some programming to support them in that learning.
And I would just add, kind of looking across some of the other programs, that it's very common that we're seeing this funding being used as a personal investment in things like allowing someone the time or space to actually go and get a job or upskill in some way, or have access to more regular childcare that's going to allow them to further their career goals, things of that sort. So there's a lot of that happening. I know the article you're referring to. I think there's less that we've seen so far in the US, just given kind of the shorter nature of a lot of these pilots for some of the kind of longer term pieces. But certainly part of the tenet of guaranteed income supplementing rather than supplanting existing benefits is for that idea of allowing for real wealth building and allowing folks to actually start to save on top of not being able to meet, crisis costs and things of that sort. But it's a great question. We've got one over here.
Well, I can speak.
Yeah.
I can speak loudly. I was just wondering if there has ever been the thought of pairing the delivery of guaranteed income, meaning cash, with some changes in the healthcare delivery system, which is already paid for, but in ways that make it more accessible and letting people know what they can access, and if it isn't accessible, make it more accessible as a part of, it's already paid for. They don't have to pay for it. But a lot of the preventive healthcare services are not accessed, which creates a lot of the differences in healthcare. And we have some control over the healthcare system, and a big initiative like guaranteed income, if you could pair it with something that addressed the issue of preventive care and lifelong health and so on, might be worth looking at, because you have people's attention.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and I think that one of the big conversations around guaranteed income is using this as an access point to connect folks with other benefits that they may be eligible for. So ensuring that, you know, you're actually on Medicaid, that you're actually signed up for, you know, the various benefits that you may have eligibility for, but may not have either known how to access or been able to. The other piece that I will say that we've definitely seen around both parent and child well-being is that with a program like Guaranteed Income, for all of the other reasons that you're better able to access employment-related things, having funding to pay for your car or to pay for childcare, pay for things of that sort, you are better able to physically access, go to, attend appointments, have flexibility in your schedule to actually make time for some of those preventative services that we know are so impactful.
I would also add that I think there's another component around this which relates to how things are delivered. In our pilot, we have a couple of folks who will be doing benefits counseling. And some of that will be around how do we make sure you don't fall off any benefits cliffs. And then some of it will be about how do we support folks to understand what else is out there. And we want to be trusting in that process. We don't want people to think that we are somehow separate from them, that we are the same community that they come from.
What happens when the pilot ends, and how do you measure success?
When the pilot ends, we are actually really excited. The folks from EPIC, Ending Poverty in California, came up to visit us, and we had this moment where I was like, oh, my people. And they are really interested in collaborating with us to figure out what comes next. So we aren't quite sure yet, and our goal is to get this out the door and get the community used to the idea that we can support our neighbors and that it is a good thing, and how do we build advocacy for it around that. And as far as success, for us, yes, there are state measures of success, but for us, success is really people being able to make decisions for themselves that help them be healthier, happier, and safer in our community. So that's going to come from a lot of our anecdotal evidence and one-on-one conversations with folks and what they do in groups.
I'd imagine you needed waivers from agencies because the IRS was including GBI under the adjusted gross income. But it kind of begs the question, wouldn't it be easier just to exclude it from adjusted gross income? And did the state of California or the federal government choose to do either of those things for the pilot?
I will turn to you for that one.
So the state has been very active in pursuing waivers for this program and has been pretty successful, which is exciting, particularly related to the CalFresh waiver. There is not a clear path to what you're describing right now, but I think as Aristeo was describing, having all 7 of these pilots together and the many pilots that have already launched in California have allowed folks to have some greater efficiencies in accessing waivers, but it is certainly still a barrier, particularly if you think about things like SSI or housing. There are certain benefits that have been more difficult for folks to access, for folks to maintain and to ensure that this will be excluded, certainly it would be more efficient to have it fully excluded.
Got one last question.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the decision for the program to focus on pregnant people, since, it seemed like the criteria was specifically for pregnant people in their first and second trimester, so if you could talk more about why that decision was made.
So our initial application was actually going to be focusing on folks who were pregnant and folks who were aging out of foster care. And we dreamed big, and the state came back and said, hold on just a second. It is a pilot. Hopefully it builds up to something more. So we adjusted to focus just on pregnant folks. One of the reasons that we did that was because as an agency, being the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, and with the partners that we have more things in place to then support families beyond this pilot with other resources that we have. And ultimately, we're really working on how do we change the conversations about serving families. How can they walk into our facility to access something like our food pantry and then find out about all of these other things? I wish it was more expansive than that, and it is where we are starting. One thing that you'll find, especially with Indigenous folks, is that we'll go, oh, there's an inch. How do we turn that into a mile? We're pretty good at that. So we're working with all of our partners to then extend it as much as we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your questions. I know we're going to have some closing remarks from Kane.
All right. Well, everyone, please join me in thanking our I don't know about all of you, but I felt like I've learned a lot. And I realize you're coming to us on the eve of your launch. So I'm really excited for you to come back after 18 months, after 2 years of implementing the program. Because I bet you'll have a lot to share with us, even more than what you've shared today. I love this notion about thinking of guaranteed income as a strategy for building strong families. Imagine that. A fully engaged, prosperous, vibrant committee. What does that mean for the families and children who live in those families? And what does that mean to us ultimately when we think of community health and well-being? So thank you for joining us. Thank you for continuing to pique our interest. Our hope, our great hope, is that investment in policy will actually lead to some fabulous policy enactment so that we can truly make sure that every family has access to financial security. So thank you. Please again join me in thanking our panelists. And thank you all for joining us on a lovely Wednesday afternoon. Please stay tuned for more information about our 2024 speaker series. If you're getting information, if you are on our e-list, you will get that. If you're not, please join our e-list. I think you can sign up by just going to our website. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I did not end this by saying that we had an opportunity to unveil and celebrate by way of sharing a film about the center's 10-year in existence. We call it 10 Years and More, of celebrating our investment, our partnership in community with every one of you. So if you haven't seen our film yet, I invite you to go to our website at www.sierrahealth.org or www.shfcenter.org and learn more about what we've been able to do together in partnership with the last 10 years and how that's paving the way for 10 plus years to come, including more conversations like this. So thanks, everyone.